First, I want to get to something mentioned in Kelly's report. From what we're seeing online, are Americans buying what Mr. Trump said about being a busy man and not having time to go through all the boxes of those documents?
I've never been a big fan of believing much of what you read online. This is, I think, the fifth or sixth iteration of Donald Trump's defense of why there were all of these classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, and then why he didn't give them back when he was asked, and then when he was told, and then when they were subpoenaed. So whether or not people buy it depends an awful lot, as much as we can tell from the polling, on how you feel about Donald Trump in general. And I think what Kelly pointed out rightly is the disparity between how people feel about this as Republicans, as Democrats, and as independents when you poll them. The important number to look at, right, because if we just sort of separate out Democrats as not going to support Donald Trump, is whether or not the support changes among Republicans. Those are the primary voters that Donald Trump needs right now, number one. And then number two, as we look towards the general election, whether or not his support changes among independents. And what is, I think, most interesting about these polls and what we're going to see over the next, say, few weeks, and probably one of the reasons you're hearing Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and others talk about how bad what Donald Trump did was, and why now all of a sudden you're hearing Nikki Haley talk about pardoning Donald Trump, is that there is a large group of Americans who do not like Donald Trump, but like what is being done to him less. And that group of people who believe that this is a politically motivated prosecution, who may believe that what he did was wrong and may not like Donald Trump, but like the idea of charging a former president for this crime less, those are the persuadable voters, either to go back into Donald Trump's corner or to be picked off by another Republican.
You know, you make a really good point. I know there are a lot of people. There's all of the people who are saying this is serious. We've talked to pundits and prosecutors who say it's very clearly laid out in this indictment how serious these charges are. So what is the disconnect if some Republicans are saying, we'll pardon him, like Vivek Ramaswamy?
Well, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon and did so at the cost of his own presidency. Reasonable people can agree that the charges can be serious, and what is laid out in the indictment, in the four corners of which indicate that a prosecutor, if everything that's in those indictments is true, could prove a crime. The point being that there's lots of crimes that can be proven, but there is prosecutorial discretion. There's the standard in the Justice Department that you don't get involved in elections, and you don't issue indictments and launch investigations into current candidates for office. There's the standard in the Justice Department that charging a former president is a much higher standard. There's the Jim Comey standard that was applied to Hillary Clinton that while someone was very, very reckless and may have broken the law, no, quote, reasonable prosecutor would bring the case. There's lots of standards to apply to prosecution other than simply, can I prove that a crime was committed?
Let's listen to a section of the speech. NewsNation carried this in full right now.
Today we witness the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. A corrupt sitting president had his top political opponent arrested on fake and fabricated charges of which he and numerous other presidents would be guilty.
Couple of networks, not surprisingly, did not air his speech. They never air his speech. PBS putting a banner on the screen reading, "Experts warn that inflammatory rhetoric from elected officials or people in power can prompt individual actors to commit acts of violence." Interesting. We could talk about that for a good hour. I know you and I could. Is this making a case to the American people that censorship is allowed?
Well, right, and censoring Donald Trump is somehow seen as more allowable than most. I think what's interesting about the individuals to create extremist acts is the first time I had seen the PBS chyron, that being the words at the bottom of the screen, is 2 nights ago on the show, we talked about how Miami was bracing to brace for violence and all of the hype surrounding, is there going to be violence and more security and there could be violence and on and on and on and on. The one thing that we're not talking about this morning is any kind of violence in Miami. the police outnumbered reporters who outnumbered protesters.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.